Hi, so you're getting ready to do your book club leader assignment. And so let's take a minute to talk about that and look through some of the resources that you have to help you do well on that. So I will share my screen and let's talk about that. So what we have here, and you can access this yourself on our webpage under the assignments, is the Leading Book Club, right? And so really what I'm looking for in this and what the overview of this assignment is that you're going to do a couple of things, right? You're going to come up with some discussion questions for your group to talk about. And what I'm really looking for in that is that these are discussion questions that are not just yes, no questions, that are not just asking people to sort of revisit or repeat the material from the book, but that are ones that are going to get your group inspired to talk about something, right? That maybe not everyone's going to agree on. That makes for a great discussion question, one that's going to get people to think critically about the material. It brings together different ideas from the book together and questions them or relates them back to course material or to other things you might have learned in other classes. So that's really what I'm looking for there, is that they are not just repeating or listing material, but that they're things that are going to inspire conversation and get people thinking critically. And while they can relate to personal experience, people can bring in experiences they've had that relate to topics. Make sure that not everything is just about that. You want to make sure that you're either connecting those personal experiences to research or theory, or at least having some questions that are focused on research and theory. So what do I mean when I say questions that inspire critical thinking? Well, you have some example excellent assignments people have done before, so I'll just show you from someone's answer a couple of those. Right, so this is from a book that no one in our class is reading. It's a book that I previously assigned, but it also happens to be by Sonia Lyubomirsky. So just don't let that confuse you if you're like, I didn't read that part. But so this question, it says Lyubomirsky opens with chapter 4 with the truism that how you think is more important to your happiness than the objective circumstances of your life. And then framing the chapter as such, she explains that changing the ways we think in terms of gratitude, optimism, social comparison, and overthinking can ultimately change our experiences of happiness. So is Lyubomirsky separating the cognitive from the affective in the framing of the first 3 happiness activities? Do you agree or disagree with this conceptualization? In your experience, are cognition and affect connected, overlapping, or mutually exclusive in your experiences of happiness, right? And so what this student is getting at is they're relating to the book itself, but saying this contention that the author makes that these strategies are about thinking differently maybe is problematic. Maybe these aren't just about thinking. Do you see overlap with affect and motivation or other components here? And so that's what they're getting at. And at this point in the term, when this student would have been leader, we would have covered a couple more things. We would have covered optimism at this point, so they could have talked more about that. So that's what I mean by that. And you can see other examples from this particular example student, but I've also posted a few others here as well that you can check out. So that's the discussion questions you're coming up with. 3 of those, you'll notice it previously used to be 4. Again, these examples are from past semesters, students who did different books to help not interfere with your own thinking about the book. So just don't pay attention to the number of questions that they answered. And the same goes for when you're looking at these examples for the length. This assignment is shorter now. People used to have to write more. I'm still looking for the same kinds of things, but of course I'm adjusting my expectations with the length of the assignment. We're expecting you to talk about less, to use fewer examples, but the shortening of it was based on student feedback that they didn't really need that amount of space to do the point, and we can make the assignment more streamlined. So for the next thing you would do for this assignment is you'll write a short, really it's a summary and analysis of the section of the book that you're leading, right? And so for this, right, what I'm really looking for is not just that you summarize, right? Everyone else in the group is going to have read the book. Ultimately, you're going to write a book review for an audience that hasn't read the book, but might want to, right? You're not trying to tell them everything that happened. You're trying to tell them what are the overarching themes of the chapters that you reviewed? And then how does the author do in addressing the goals that they set out to achieve in that chapter, right? So in this example from that previous student, right, if Lyubomirsky set out to show the different ways that we can change our thinking, did she do that effectively? First, did she, actually address that question with the kind of research that was talked about, with the strategies? Were the research examples well chosen? Were the conclusions drawn from them supported by that research? And so it's about, right, again, saying what the key themes are, but then talking about, whether or not the author achieved those themes and giving examples of how they did or didn't do that, right? And so again, rather than summarizing everything that they say, give a few key examples of what they talked about. And so again, to show an example of what that would look like, we have here, make this bigger. Right, so this is introducing the book. There's a major assumption underlying this, that 40% model that we just learned about, right? And so they're giving these key themes and major assumptions. And importantly, Lyubomirsky asserts that the results can only be reaped through continued hard work and fit with an individual person. And then it says, Lyubomirsky introduces evidence to support the three happiness activities of gratitude, optimism, and avoiding overthinking and social comparison. And then gives some examples of the examples that Lyubomirsky uses in talking about that, and then gives a particular example of the problems of the kind of evidence that the student believes that the author is using here, right? And so it says that, right, she used evidence that was an interesting study, but didn't necessarily support the conclusion that she was drawing from it, right? And so what I mean by using key examples is that this student laid out a couple particular things that Sonia Lyubomirsky said, and then gave examples there, but also gave a specific example of why that was problematic, right? But they didn't list every time there was a particular problem here. And so you would do the same. And so then they do that a few different times with some of the key themes that are talked about. And also give some strengths, right? You don't have to dislike the book to think critically about it, right? You can say why something was done well, how it was done well, give an example of something that was done really well and how it relates to strong research support. So that's what we're looking for this writing a short summary and analysis of the book section. And the third part is very similar, but now you're looking for and summarizing a related article. And this is more focused on the summary than the analysis, although you'll also give some analysis of that. And so here, as you're reading the book and they're talking about research, maybe you think of a study that you learned about somewhere else, or you think, that doesn't, I wonder if there's other research on that, or I wonder if there's a study that looked at whether this other factor moderates that or changes, right, the nature of these effects. I wonder what the mechanism is, right? And then you go and look on PsycInfo or Google Scholar for research on that, and that's what you could use as that additional article that you're bringing in, right? So, and this is something that, again, you can use to build towards to build your final paper ultimately, right? These can be the sources that you and your group members use to ultimately critique the book. So you will find and summarize a related article. And so let's show an example. It's this student found, a recent ish. It doesn't, I'm not looking for a particular time period. There's no standards on that. It just needs to make sure it's clear why it's relevant to what you're talking about here. It's fine to go back to classic research and critique that or connect it. That's absolutely all right. You'll know I did that in class with a study from the 70s the other day, right? And as long as you explain why you're making that connection, that's totally sufficient. So pick the study, specifically explain why this is relevant to the topic that they were covering, that this, they were interested in focusing on how much research is self-focused versus other-focused, and explained how that relates to the reading. And then, pretty briefly, and you can actually be even briefer than this student was, say the reasoning for doing the study, the methods of the study, and the results of it. And for the methods, you can be quite short, right? The person, if they really wanted to know in detail how that went, they could go look at the study itself, but say enough so that we know how to understand the results, right? We need to know if there's a control group that's being compared against, so that we understand what a significant difference means, right? A significant difference between whom. But you don't necessarily need to say the number of participants, although you can. You don't need to report any particular effects or findings, right? You don't need to put any statistics in here. Just say in words what they found, and again, why that's meaningful and why that's connected to this article, right? So here, this is where the student really gets into, right, why this relates to Lyubomirsky's explanation of the factors related to, or the activities related to happiness. So that's what we're looking for there. Then the last piece is, and this should be really quick. This is just taking a couple notes, a couple bullet points when you're leading the discussion, and then handing that in. It can be a couple bullet points, it can be a short paragraph, but you don't need to. This, unlike the other pieces, doesn't need to be your best writing. This is really just to take a few notes on what you talk about as a group. And then you will hand all 4 of those things in after the discussion ends to be graded. You'll post the first 3 parts for your group ahead of time. And so I've shown you this. This is the leader assignment itself, and we've kind of talked about all of these pieces. This gives you some more details and prompts if you want to, if you like to read things rather than listen to all the things we just said, right? This walks you through some prompts, right, to make sure that you address the major goals and themes, that you talk about the evidence that the author provides, that you address any strengths and limitations, and if there's any implications or applications of this stuff that's talked about in those chapters. And then the related article, again, this is has the page limits for all of these, and this is where you need to say, how it relates. Briefly summarize the article and how it relates to the chapters. That's really all I'm looking for there, and then the group discussion and summary. So you see all those parts. Got that piece. I showed you an example. There's 2 other examples if you'd like to see others. And then the last thing that is relevant to being a group leader is this is the rubric that we'll use for grading. And so this really just kind of walks through it. It just shows the number of points that are assigned to each of those pieces that are laid out in the other assignment. Right? So the discussion questions are 15 points. 5 points per excellent question that inspires the conversation, is open-ended, insightful, goals and themes of the, sorry, now we're on the summary and the reflection for 50 points, right? These are the different pieces of it. So you can get a sense, right, of how much you should really focus on something, right? Evaluating the evidence is worth 15 points, right? And so that's worth more than just listing the goals and themes, even though that is also important, right? So that's what I'm looking for there. And then the related empirical article is worth 30 points, right? You need to choose one that's related and explain that choice, and you need to briefly summarize it. And so that's what we have there. So if you've watched this to the end, thanks so much for listening, and I hope that this was helpful. And again, check out all of these resources. Thanks so much.